Good morning and welcome to a new edition of the Arsenal Opinion Podcast. There's no Matt or Johnny here today. I'm joined by Michael Rainey. How are you doing?
Very well. Thanks for the opportunity to be a part.
Yep, it's going to be an exciting episode today. As you'll know, if you listen to this podcast or read Le Grove, I've got a bit of an unhealthy obsession with culture, business culture. Michael sent me an email, 2 emails, and then we got in touch and we had a really good conversation about what his background is, what he's doing now, and his love for Arsenal. And it was all about culture. And it's there was some really interesting crossovers. And I thought this conversation would make a really good podcast. So we're going to do a little experiment today and see if that intuition plays out. So, Michael, I'd love to, before we get into the heights of takes, hear a little bit about your journey with Arsenal and how you came to be wearing that delightful pink shirt. I've never seen that in the wild. I've never seen anyone in America wearing that in the wild.
I can tell you, when I go to the local coffee shop, there's only one person that has ever asked me about it, to the point where they knew what I was doing wearing my soccer jersey out in the wild, like you're saying. I love this jersey. Absolutely love it.
Was it the Palace game that we wore it? And Saliba scored a goal. Was it that?
Yeah, when Zinchenko was like, do you remember that? Do you remember? Yeah. Yes, absolutely loved it. Man, the left foot, I finished.
So tell us about your journey with Arsenal. How did you come into falling in love with the club?
Yeah, this was one where I wanted to be able to connect with my son, who's now a freshman in college, as we would say here in the States. But back as he was transitioning middle school to high school, wanted to spend more time with him. And I grew up playing Madden, EA Sports, Madden football, whatever it was. And we all of a sudden got connected with FIFA.
And really? That's interesting.
Yes, that's right. So I thought this was a very original story, but then I heard Matt Turner, probably who we should not talk about. I get that. But when he talked about his origin story, about how he connected to Arsenal via FIFA. So we didn't know anything about the Premier League. I did not play soccer growing up. My son played a little bit, just recreational league. So we started playing, and he went into career mode. And the default for that particular, I think it was 17, I can't remember exactly what, but the default was Man United. So he was now playing career mode, being part of the Man United club. So I go see a buddy. I'm a former active duty U.S. Army officer. I was seeing a buddy who was still in the Army at the time, and he loved the Premier League. So when he heard us talking about FIFA, he was like, "Okay, who's your favorite team?" And my son says, "Well, I'm playing as part of Man United," and he's like, "No, no, your favorite team." That's like somebody from the world who has no idea about Major League Baseball or the National Football League saying my favorite team is the Yankees, or my favorite team is the Cubs. People that don't know what they're talking about and want to have a favorite team will choose. So he wouldn't let us. And he's like, "You got to pick somebody else." I'm like, "Okay, well, who do you follow?" And it was, of course, Arsenal. And as we started to dig into it, what I fell in love with is that it started at the artillery ground. So the reason why we have a cannon is because it was for the munitions plant, and it was the lunchtime team of the munitions plant. And I was a combat engineer by trade, and our regimental colors were red because we were originally part of the field artillery for the United States Army, whose colors were red, which of course match up with artillery units within the British regiments on down the line. So between that connection, and of course, my brother in arms, loving Arsenal, that started us on that journey. So we started playing with Arsenal. Coach Emery was my first coach.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that's your first experience with Arsenal. Can I apologize on behalf of the Premier League for that?
Yeah. Hey, I told you a little bit about this, and I want the whole world to hear it. As we were going through, and I was connecting, and we had the 7-game unbeaten streak, and I thought, man, this is awesome.
We got our Arsenal back.
Yeah, I loved when we did lose and we were going through that bad stretch. I always looked forward to the Le Grove because there was an objectivity to it that did not seem like it was in the same when I looked at other articles about art. So everything, the sky was falling, everything was terrible, and you would be able to provide me with a little bit more perspective on long-term vision, and that's how I connected. Because you always brought it back to your understanding of the business world, your understanding of strategy, your understanding of long-term development, and I appreciated that very much. So that, long story longer, that's how we connected with Arsenal.
Oh, what a great story. I two parts to that. I love the falling in love with Arsenal and coming in through FIFA. It's such an interesting phenomenon that happens around the world, and I don't think people in London truly appreciate that. It's bit, I worked in I work in esports now. We've got we have an esports player, and it's a crazy little world. I think somebody in esports said that 2 million people. Well, there are 2 million people watch FIFA being played. Watch streamers over a weekend. So it's hugely popular. It's a gateway drug, and it brings people into the game. And it's just interesting that the ties in the Premier League to esports into actual football aren't as strong as they could be. But it's massive. So that's cool. And the second part was the Emery bit. It's interesting that you say that the writing was objective. That was probably the worst period of my entire Le Grove career, because all the people, built up a following, and you've got people that comment, and everybody hated me. Everybody hated me. It got to points where I was writing about Emery, and it was the angle that I took from the start. A guy doesn't know how to prepare a defense, gets rolled by big personalities, plays really negative, dull football. All of these things came to fruition. But the people that followed the blog for so many years, they were like, hold on. We've been writing for whatever it was, 14, 13 years to get Wenger out. Now Wenger's out, and you don't like the new guy. And is this just your shtick? And I'm like, it's not the shtick. The shtick is to write objectively about what I think, and to not be pushed into a direction of writing I don't feel is true. Like, I'm not going to be a cheerleader for someone I don't believe in. And then he inevitably failed. And then the next round on the blog was Arteta. And then people were like, no, we had a lot of people didn't like Arteta because of the way Emery was cheated. And that was a whole different story. But yeah, interesting. And also, I do think when you come into supporting a new team, and you support a new team at a low ebb, I think that's a good move, because now you can really enjoy where you are. Whereas coming in a team at the top and then they're falling, that can't be fun. It's like the New Yorkers who pick up the Knicks. Like they're the New Yorkers that pick up the Knicks, or the Jets. Right? That's
the Aaron Rodgers Jets. Yes,
the Aaron Rodgers Jets.
Yeah.
I've been reading about that today. All right. Let's we've got a little tradition on this show. I'm not sure whether you know about it.
Hottest of takes.
Hottest of takes.
The hottest of takes.
The AOP, hottest of takes. Make it spicy.
Where are you going to take your first ever hottest of takes, Michael? Make it spicy.
I've been practicing all day. This is a big deal. This is a big deal to me. So here's my hottest of takes. Coach Arteta, from my perspective, Coach Arteta's desired end state is to not win trophies.
That is you got to explain that. That's piping hot.
There you go. So his end state is to not win trophies. In my opinion, from what I'm seeing, his desired end state is to maximize organizational effectiveness. And the reason for that is because this concept of the line of empowerment. And the line of empowerment is this. Your line of empowerment is based on where you have the ability to decide and act. So where Coach Arteta, I think, does a very good job is he lives within his line of empowerment. He can't decide to win trophies because there are so many things outside of his control. There may be a team that is circumventing the rules for an extended period of time. There may be a referee that forgets to draw the line. A VAR assistant that forgets to draw. There's so many things outside of his ability to decide and act that he must ask permission. So he asks permission of the Premier League to make everybody follow the rules. He asks permission of the officials to be able to draw the lines. But inside of his organization, he has the ability to decide and act. So he's going to maximize everything that he has the ability to decide and act, because it's, in my opinion, it's his belief maximizing organizational effectiveness is what will return trophies. So he's not interested in getting the trophy. He's interested in maximizing organizational effectiveness, because he believes that's how we're going to get trophies. How did that come across? Does that make sense?
I liked it. Spicy, to the point, unique. I think it's controversial. People are going to be talking about that. That's a spicy hot take. I don't know where would I go with a hot take this week if we're thinking about organizational. I think Arteta is close. I think we're close to hitting phase 5. I think from an organizational perspective, I think Arteta feels like he owns all of the positions in the squad. I feel like he's got the identity of the club mapped down, and I think deep down he probably believes that there will be a trophy this year. I don't think there's going to be any excuses. Like, he came out very bold at the start of the season, and he must feel something in that dressing room at the moment. I think some of the sort of the issues that we've had at the start of the season, some of the problems that we've had to come out the back of, some of the things that have been thrown at us, a team with weaker character or a weaker culture would have collapsed around that. Teams have passed. Some of those Emery teams that you watched back in the day with your son, they would have collapsed under certain pressure. I wonder whether he's looking at the reaction of this team and how they're just getting on with it, and how they're pushing teams away, dealing with red cards, dealing with injustice in the system. I think that he thinks that he's got the squad where they want to be, and we haven't even seen players like Marino coming into the side yet. So that's where I'm going.
Love it. Did you see the pictures of him in training?
I did. Yeah, he's
huge.
He's gonna put Thomas Partey out of business for the rest of the season. So I'm pretty excited to see what he can offer after Thomas's performance of the weekend. All right, let's get into an introduction about you and your background, because I think that's important to frame the conversation that we're going to have about this. So tell me a little bit about yourself and what you've been doing for your career.
Yeah, I absolutely love athletics, sports. I played basketball and baseball growing up. I played basketball in college at the United States Military Academy here at West Point in New York. And that began this love of understanding how teams work together right outside of Crystal Arena, where we played basketball. There's a quote by Douglas MacArthur. He says, "Upon the fields of friendly strife," so athletics, "are sown the seeds that on other fields, on other days, will bear the fruits of victory." So there was this concept where sports, here's my opinions, probably another hot take: sports, nothing like war. Hey, you're not getting shot at. We use concepts all the time, being in the trenches. You'll hear that in football. And sports, nothing like. However, combat, a lot like sports, because you have an integrated set of elements, this team that must be able to work together in order to accomplish a defined objective. So it's always fascinated by this parallel about how the lessons we learned on the hardwood or playing in a competitive environment in sports, I believe, truly impacted my ability to lead and to command. And I think it gave me an advantage. It separated me from my fears, because we had already been in that competitive environment and was able to learn and grow, where we didn't lose lives when we were playing basketball, but we learned a lot. And I start to see this parallel with high-level sports, competitive, dynamic environments, and the lessons that I learned in the Army while being deployed, while being in command. So as I transitioned out of the Army, my last job in the Army, I taught in the Department of Systems Engineering at the United States Military Academy. In fact, my faculty research was in decision-making in uncertainty and ambiguity. How could we assist leaders, commanders in a combative environment make high-quality decisions? So as I transitioned out of the Army, I wanted to be able to do the same. So I started a decision science firm here. We're located in Central Texas. We have Department of Defense clients, public safety sector clients, commercial clients. Also, our next step is we want to be able to support sports, high-level competitive sports as well. We feel like we have the ability to do that. But here's our tagline: we want to be able to help leaders make better decisions on the problems keeping them up at night. And the way we do that, we believe, is so that they can empower the organization for maximum effectiveness and decisive action. And to your point, I think Coach Arteta believes that his organization, or Arsenal as a whole, from the turnstile to the ticket takers to marketing to the physios to win the dog, I believe he has the organization positioned for decisive action at every level. Every level can make a decision to get us to where we want to go. And that's what's so exciting to be able to be a part of Arsenal right now.
Love that. Okay. So when you're talking about the military, and you read quite a lot on culture and actually the military bit, do you think culture kind of originates from the military throughout history? Like the idea of trying to rally people around a purpose. Can you like thread, like, what does culture mean in the armed services?
Yeah, we use the Office of People Analytics from the Department of Defense definition of culture, and I'm going to read it to you because I believe in it. It says culture is defined as an organization's culture is often expressed in terms of an organization's long-held beliefs about itself, the expectations of its members, and practices shared by the group. So there's three components to culture. You've got beliefs, expectations, and practices. Now, ultimately, from my opinion, my perspective, culture is present because it gives us the opportunity to connect. And when you are in competitive and dynamic environments, we must be the most extreme. We're talking about military, the competitive, dynamic, can't possibly know what's about to happen when you leave the wire. You can prepare, you can train, you can conduct battle drills, you can do all those things, but you can't possibly know what's around the corner. So that dynamic environment, and then it matters if you win or not. It matters indelibly to the individual, to the company, to the group, to the larger organization, to the country. And when you're in those environments, competitive and dynamic, your ability to connect and inspire matter beyond many other things, because there have been, and you had a great example within the country of Haiti and their freedom, where you can be outnumbered, you can be out-resourced, you can be out-professional, you can be all of these things, and yet still the quote-unquote subordinate force can overcome. We've seen it throughout history. If there is a belief, a connection, if they are inspired, you can overcome so many different obstacles. And I think that's where that connection comes from. That's why culture matters. It gives everybody in the organization an opportunity to connect to something with meaning and be able to do things that they would not be able to do otherwise.
So, and the leader that we were talking, the Haitian leader that you were talking about, was Toussaint Louverture, who was one of the only people to fend off Napoleon. Mm-hmm. And he was. I read a piece about him in a book, and one of the things that he implemented when he took over kind of a bit of a ragtag army was he made everybody wear a uniform. He believed the uniform would be the red thread that would unite them, and he was incredibly strict about the appearance of the uniform. Like those sorts of things. Why are they important? And like there's a thread of relation into sport as well, because Arteta pays attention to things like that, how you dress, how you conduct yourself, and players don't wear what they want to the game. They all wear the tracksuits, right? Why is that important?
Yeah, I think you said it well. Like, I love this jersey, but this is the year where he's like, no, we're going to wear the blacks. Do you remember him talking about? I mean, they specifically said, no, we're not going to wear these pinks. We're going to wear the blacks. And I think you see it most when you see people do this. And I absolutely love it. And when they're Saliba's grabbing this and he's running into the great Gabriel all the way down the line. And it goes back to that connection. So am I part of something bigger than myself? And because there's an old saying, also those that fought the Napoleon quite a bit, the old Prussian army, now known as Germany, they came to the point they got tired of getting their tails kicked by Napoleon over and over. And they ended up being able to say, and I'm paraphrasing here, just keeping it short, where the generals from the Prussian army said, none of us are as good as Napoleon. Not a single general in the Prussian army is as good as Napoleon. But they also said this. They said, none of us are as good as all of us. So they started to look at, it was no longer general on general. What they wanted to do to be able to say, how could we band together where each of our strengths could come together and make us far more than any individual could be? And that's where this understanding in the Prussian army of the general staff, people would bring in their expertise and they would knit it together so that they are more than any individual part. And that connection, like we're talking about, the connection to the uniform, the connection to the badge, it gives us the ability to say, hey, none of us is going to do this on our own. And if Coach Arteta talks about it all the time, it's not just 11v11. It's however many people are in the Emirates, 50,000, 60,000, one voice, solid, love hearing the drum when I'm listening through it, and all of those things coming together because all of us are far better than any of us. Does that make sense?
That does make sense, yeah. So you spoke about the need to inspire. Inspiring people is quite an intangible, right? You can't quite put your finger on it. Unai Emery didn't come across as particularly, I don't mean to bag on him, he's just not the most inspiring of guys. But there's some, fans talk about aura. There's something about Mikel Arteta. But from day one, he came in with a pretty big belief. He's like, I'm gonna bring Arsenal back to the top. I'm gonna win Premier League titles. He told Willian, I'm gonna win the Champions League after 5 years, and you're gonna be on the pitch. Got that one a little bit wrong. But what role does an ambition that massive play in, like, setting the scene? Like, is it important to come in big and brash? A lot of fans didn't like that he came in and said stuff like that. People thought he was crazy, right? They thought he was arrogant. They thought he was rude. Thought he didn't understand the job. What do you make of that? Like, how do you get to this culture? But like, what's the inspiration side of it?
So if we break it down, culture, belief, expectation, practices. So what do we value? Those are our long-standing beliefs. How do those beliefs turn into expectations? How does expectations turn into practices? So it's, in my opinion, it's absolutely critical, because what he's doing is saying, hey, you have an opportunity to be able to connect to what I'm saying, as well as you have the opportunity to be able to not connect to what I'm saying. The slang would be, hey, how do I know if I'm going to get on the bus or not? I need to know where it's going. Right at the beginning right at the top of the bus, it'll say, hey, this is the destination, or the tube or the subway, whatever it is. You're like, if you're going to get on the bus or not, because if you want to get to the destination. So I appreciate it right from the very beginning. He's like, look, here's the deal. Here's the expectation. Here's where we're going. Get on the bus or get off the bus. And if you don't want to be on the bus, that's not personal, because there were teammates of his that he no longer said, hey, I want you to go somewhere where you can connect to what's being said. And it's obviously not here. So he was very clear about setting those expectations up front. And those expectations were born out of his values, the beliefs, which we know as his non-negotiables. One of his very early on interviews, he said, here's the deal. Here's what are non-negotiables to me: respect, commitment, passion. Respect, commitment, passion. Those are the non-negotiables. So from there, he's going to set up those expectations. What do I expect with respect to respect? What do I expect with respect to commitment? What do I expect with respect to passion? And then what I think he's done a good job of is then setting up, all right, here's the practices that are going to connect to those expectations, that connect to the values. Can I give you an example?
Yeah.
Okay. So the famous, your teammate, Jacob Pauly, I love when he does his impression of, when I lose the ball, I get upset. One of my favorites, when he said, when I lose my phone, I get upset. Remember when you're talking about the pickpockets, your podcast about the pickpocket, and it was spot on. I laughed. I mean, I was dying laughing in the car. But what he talked about is he's like, hey, there is a commitment. The expectation is commitment. And what he did not say, he did not have an expectation of you never lose the ball. That's not what Coach Arteta said. He said, when you do lose the ball, you run. I don't know if you remember that from the Amazon documentary. Then he slams the laundry cart down. When I lose, the expectation is I'm upset. So the practice is when I lose the ball, I run. And he talked about it all the time. He's like, if anybody loses the ball and they drop their head, or anybody loses the ball and they say, it's okay, we'll get it back. He's like, no, that you are not meeting the stated practice that's tied to the expectation of when I lose the ball, I'm upset. So from left to right, values, commitment, expectation, you're upset when you lose the ball. The practice is as soon as they lose the ball, I run. Like, I love it. I see Ben White, he'll lose the ball. And then next thing I know, he's 2/3 of the way across the pitch, chasing that thing down, because he understands the culture that has been set. And Coach Arteta now he struggled with it with Aubameyang, and I know that's on the list. We'll talk about it a little bit. He's learning. He's a new leader, first-time coach, strategic leader. It's hard, and he learned a lot of things. Now he is very clear on how expectations tie to practices. I'll give you one more example, and then I'm going to turn it back over to you. In Mikel Marino's introduction video, we're sitting down, and he's like, hey guys, we need to welcome Mikel. And he said specifically, we need to teach him our language. Do you remember this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we need to teach him our language. He's saying right now, our culture, it's no longer his, it's there's a shared responsibility that we've got to bring up new personnel based on the practices. He said, if you see somebody in training, if we see Mikel lose the ball and he doesn't run, then we've got to be able to teach him, and we've got to be able to do it quickly. So that's just what, long answer to your question, but that's what those components are. Expectations that come from the beliefs, and then those expectations are turned into practices.
So going back to your point about the video, a lot of people, again, don't like these games that he plays, but you're basically saying the games are a dramatization of his cultural principles, and that's why he does it.
Yeah, he's trying to, in my opinion, he's trying to illustrate those components that we're talking about. As a leader, if we're not careful, if all he did every single meeting was say, respect, commitment, passion, respect, commitment, passion, respect, commitment, passion, I think we as humans understand that will essentially become stale. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they'll just become words on a wall. And nothing drives me more insane than an organization that's got stated mission or vision or core values, and it's just a piece of paper that's on the wall. It doesn't mean anything. And so the deal is he's like, hey, this is meaningful to me. And what we talk when I work with C-suite or I work with strategic leaders, I'm like, hey, your mission, vision, core value, and strategies. There's 4 components: mission, vision, core value, and strategy. Those are the only things that a strategic leader has time to talk about. They don't have time to talk about anything else. Mission, vision, core value, and strategy. Now, the deal is because it's so rich, it has so much depth, you can talk about it in an infinite number of ways. So every time you hear something about, hey, what's the expectation? The expectation is that you keep your head on a swivel. The expectation is that you're aware. The expectation is that you have to be able to see those things and anticipate those things that you might not anticipate, like your phone being lifted from the table. He's constant, in my opinion, he's constantly bringing those things back. The light bulb. He's trying to set that expectation of, hey, we are a team and we are going to gain energy by being connected to each other. Yeah, all of those things for me is just a way for him to talk about the same things in a different way to connect to his players.
Do you think, creating a culture and keeping it going is really hard because you have to be very disciplined and very strict. Do you think the sort of slightly maniacal persona that Arteta has, Klopp had, Mourinho had when he was at his best, is that we're like, he's insane, but is it just he's insanely good at being disciplined about what he believes in? Is that like you speak to lots of different leaders, like there must be leaders that are like, we've had Michael in, we've got our stuff down, and then they go away, and then 2 months later you're like, but you're not doing any of this. Like, is it being maniacal in discipline? Is that what you see in top leaders?
Yeah, I think that's fair. So the way we would talk about it in the Army is if there's a standard, if there's a stated standard or a stated practice, if we as leaders walk by something that is not to standard and don't do anything about it, we have now set a new standard in the organization. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So the deal is that, again, I have nothing else to talk about. If there is a practice that has been stated, has been agreed upon by the organization, then it is my responsibility, as our leaders' responsibility, as our organization's responsibility to be able to address something that is not meeting the expectation. So that, in my opinion, I don't see him as maniacal. I see him as not willing to be distracted. And I get it. That's probably the same thing. I see him constantly talking about the things that are important, and he will not entertain something that is not important to get the organization where we want to go. That's why he's like, yeah, no, I love Pep, and nobody's going to tear us apart. He's not going to entertain it. And people that get drug in and trying to get him to talk about, the referees, even when he says it's a disgrace and he comes back and he clarifies his comments, he may have, quote unquote, slipped a little bit to allow his true feelings to be set, but he'll quickly be able to reorient and say, hey, this is not an issue. What is the issue is us being perfect, because that's his expectation for the season. It's perfection. He said it in multiple interviews early on.
So talk to me about implementation. And there are two parts that I want to explore in this. The first one is, there'll be people that work in leadership positions that are listening to this podcast. Maybe people new to leadership positions that are like, I want to take some of this Arteta culture stuff and factor it into my work. You get into this Arsenal dressing room, people are talking to each other and saying words like "fufty," like the social media is all over the place. There is no standards in this organization. How do you start implementing these standards? You said you want to win the Premier League. You've got a big mission. How do you start impacting change? Because if you go in too hard, you can destroy yourself before you've even begun. Like, what's the best way to start affecting change?
And what a great question, especially with what Coach Arteta inherited. The first and foremost is, in my opinion, is you start with the mission. So we talk about the four components: mission, vision, core values, and strategy. So if we say mission is who we are, why we exist, and the difference that we're going to make, that's the three components of mission: who we are, why we exist, the difference we're going to make. So off the website, is just straight off the website, Arsenal Football Club exists. Think about a great mission statement from my perspective. Arsenal Football Club exists to make our fans proud wherever they are in the world and however they choose to follow us. That's their stated mission. So ultimately, the first thing that a leader would do is to be able to discuss this with the organization and say, hey, this is what we're about. Every minute, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, us as an organization, we're about making our fans proud wherever they are in the world and however they choose to follow us. So that's first. And what we have to do is be able to assess as an organization and then start to build out our expectations around this is our mission. So when we say out of those four components, mission, vision, core values, and strategy, if we could only do one, if we could only concentrate on one, my perspective has got to be the mission. Because what we have to do is to empower the organization to say, things like, hey, should I do this or should I not do this? And I want the first thing in their mind to say is it going to make our fans proud? Because that's our mission statement. Wherever they are, however they follow us, I've got to take all of them into account when I'm making my minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day decisions. If I show up late to a team meeting, am I making our fans proud? No, not. So I'm gonna be on time. Yeah. I mean, we could go through this.
So he's like that mission statement allows you to create a filter for making decisions.
Yeah, ultimately, that's what those things are.
Takes
now,
the emotion out of it and subjectivity.
But so it's very emotional because we're very connected. My bias as a decision scientist is all about the decision making. As a commander, when I was in sector, I had 133 soldiers within my command. It was impossible for me to make every decision for every soldier 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's fair, right? When you talk about these larger organizations. Yeah, I've got to empower the organization for decisive action at every level. And that first starts with, if all we did as Arsenal Football Club, if all we did was make decisions based on the fact, do I think this is going to make our fans proud wherever they are and however they follow us? Like how good would we be? Like I'm going to go hard in training. Why? Because it's going to make our fans proud. If I get hurt, Coach Arteta, in my opinion, he talks about, yes, his expectation is our players play 3 days a week. He's very clear. The expectation is you are able to play 3 days a week. And his also expectation is not that you never get hurt, but we're starting to see him more and more now. His expectation is if you do get hurt, I want you pushing the physios before they push you. I want you pushing the limits on you getting back, not to re-injure yourself, but I want you to do everything within your ability to decide and act to make our fans proud. And that's by getting back onto the pitch. That's by giving everything that you have. Does that come across?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there are going to be people in a new dressing room that want to, and this is the same in every organization. You can put a big culture deck down and then someone is going to challenge it. Now, invariably, like you hope the person that challenges it is somebody that is not very good at what they do. You're begging, you're saying, please, Mustafi, please be the guy that does it. But it turns out it's your captain who's on 350 grand a week.
Yeah. Or Ozil, considered one of the greatest playmakers you're right. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So what's how do you deliver, how do you go about doing, if you're going to kind of decapitate somebody that has gone against your values, how do you do that and not upset the rest of the squad? Because Oba is extremely popular. Like how do you, and some leaders might say, hey, he's a star performer, like he scores all the goals, leave him alone. Right. So how does that work?
Yeah, so that's man, you're really good at this. I don't think you may not know. But that's if I got 4 things: mission, vision, core values, strategy. If I could only talk about one, it's mission. If I could talk about 2 of them, it's mission and core values, because core values set up the boundaries. It's like, hey, this is how we're going to operate. It also lets us know how we're not going to operate. So you may think that, hey, our fans will be proud if we win trophies. Let's say, Edu, our fans will be proud if I win trophies. So I'm going to circumvent the financial rules so that we can win trophies and make our fans proud. That would be the concept. Well, do you remember in his interview early on, it's like, hey, it's not solely whether we win or not, it's how we win. Do you remember him talking about that? Very clear. It's like, hey, how we win is also important in making our fans proud. So there were boundaries there. There were non-negotiables or values that were set up that we're going to do this in a way where we're not going to break the rules. So that's why those core values are so important. It set those boundaries to allow everybody in the dressing room, in the team room, to be able to self-select. Do I want to be in or do I want to be out? Completely understand the concept of is like, hey, here's what's hard is when new leadership comes in and there's a new understanding of the values that are needed to achieve the mission. because that's a strategic leader's job. It's like, okay, I connected to the mission, or Coach Arteta would not have joined Arsenal. He connected to the mission of Arsenal Football Club exists to make our fans proud wherever they are in the world and however they choose to follow us. So he connected to that. So it's his job to be able to say, okay, here's our non-negotiables that's going to get us that. Here's the challenge is that he's a new leader. He's bringing his perspective on what those non-negotiables are. And I believe we can say it's radically different to the previous leader. Is that fair based on your assessment?
I would agree. Mesut Ozil was dropped out of the squad, and then he found himself back in.
So we see that Coach Arteta, I think he did a good job. He gave everybody an opportunity to opt in.
So you think that's for don't come in and make a judgment. Like don't make a judgment before you've given people a chance. Like that's a positive step from a leader.
I think it's absolutely critical. Can't do it otherwise. That we tell leaders all the time, there's always more you can't see than you can. Always more you can't see than you can see. If I make a decision solely based on what I observe or I see, I will miss out on a majority of context. So the Harvard Business Review's got a good article on this. You can look it up later. Highly encourage it. But there's research that talks about the fundamental attribution error. Fundamental attribution error. That's the research. Here's the quick synopsis. If I'm late, I usually attribute that to context. My alarm didn't go off. There was bad traffic, whatever. So I based it on context. If somebody else is late, I will attribute it to character. They're lazy. That's how humans work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's faulty. It's an error because there's context that if I say, hey, Alba's lazy, then I am attributing to his character, and there may have been extenuating circumstances. So what we want to, if I say Ozil is malicious, or he undermines, or based on what I've seen from outside the dressing room from the previous regime, then there's going to be something that I cannot see. So I've got to be able to allow everybody in the organization the opportunity to connect, because I think it's undeniable that he was talented.
Oh, yeah, unbelievably talented.
Yeah. How would that first year have been different if Ozil met the expectations of Coach Arteta? How would it have been different in year 2 if Alba would have met I don't know. But the deal is that he understood that this is who we have. I've got to be able to get them to connect and understand to be able to meet these expectations. So that, in my opinion, that's how we come into an organization. Everything we bring it back to the mission. Everything we tie it to the mission through this lens of here's our expectations of these core values. Now, do you remember Alba's recent interview where he was talking about, hey, man, like I came back and I came back late, and I admitted that I came back late, and Coach Arteta flipped out on me. Do you remember? And look, that's the definition of a non-negotiable. Like he had a core value was violated. And I believe, if I have to take a look, respect, commitment, and passion, it was a combination of the respect and commitment. So I believe, just from my understanding of the story, Coach Arteta was very clear on, yes, I want you to be able to go see your mother. I want you to be able to do and understand you've got to be back by this time to be able to make the match. If you're not back by this time, you won't be able to get your COVID test in time, blah, 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 blah. And he didn't do it.
You wonder whether part of Oba trying to sense how much power he had in that moment, because people will want to challenge the system, right? Is the system real?
Hey, when as a parent, congratulations, by the way, right? You set boundaries, and you set boundaries for the health of the organization, the health of your family. Don't walk out into the street without holding my hand. And have you ever walked up close to the street and you see that toddler kind of look back?
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, is this real? Is this a non-negotiable or is this a negotiable? Because we in organizations, we just want to know where the boundaries are. Because boundaries are what give us the freedom to be able to operate within the boundaries. Massive amounts of freedom to be able to operate in the boundaries. That's what I'm seeing with Coach Arteta. So these senior leaders, though, that's been around a while, and they're like, "Hey, this is not my first rodeo. Hey, coach, this is your first coaching job. This is your first job as the head man. Hey, let's just see where are these truly non-negotiables, or is this one where you can't have? I love it when you talk about not having ketchup in the canteen. You're like,
Yeah.
Okay, that's done. And then you're like, well, somebody's going to bring ketchup in to see if they can have ketchup or not. It's always this understanding of, hey, where are those boundaries? What is a non-negotiable? What is not? Does that make sense?
That does. And Arteta moved on Oba and Ozil pretty quickly. Is part of the reason that you do that it's not to punish the players, but it's to send a message to everybody else in the organization. Like when you do something like that, does it actually oxygenate the culture?
I'm biased in this regard. It is his responsibility to protect the organization. And from his perspective, his core values is a way to be able to protect the organization. And now, how could he have done this better with Alba? As leaders, if we have core values that beget expectations, that beget practices, it is our responsibility, it's my responsibility as the leader to clearly communicate the expectation. There is no ambiguity. If there's any ambiguity, then it's my responsibility to change it, not theirs. So I've got to ask, what is my responsibility to them before I ask their responsibility to me? So Alba's responsibility was to get back on time. Now, so my responsibility was to clearly communicate, hey, here's what the expectations are, be able to clearly communicate. If we do not meet these expectations, here are the results. Here are the consequences. Now, for me, consequence is a neutral term, not positive, not negative. It's a fact. It's a data point. If this, then that. It's a logic statement. And as an organizational leader, I must clearly communicate the results of meeting the expectations versus not meeting the expectations. So that's how Coach Arteta, I think, has improved. Early on, there may have been some ambiguity based on what Alba said. And he's like, man, why am I being flipped out on right now? Well, if those expectations were not clear, that's something that Coach Arteta could improve upon. And I think he has done that over the years. I think he has learned. On the flip side of that, when those expectations are clearly stated, then you protect the organization by allowing those that meet those expectations to thrive and those that don't meet the expectations to be able to move on. I'll give you an example. Here's what I think all the time. Alba was a mentor to Saka. Is that fair? Remember, he gave him like the diamond encrusted, you call him little chili, gave him the diamond. Like he was mentoring Saka. Who do you want mentoring your future leaders in the organization?
Probably want good cultural ambassadors.
Yeah, I don't want those that don't align with the mission. I don't want those that don't adhere to the core values. I don't want them around so that they are pouring into everybody else in the organization. Do you remember when Alba was sent off and Rob Holding was in the buffet line in the Amazon documentary, and he was just kind of like chuckled to himself? Yeah, everybody knows who doesn't meet the expectations. Everyone in the organization knows who doesn't meet the expectations. What they don't know is what's going to be done about it. And every time I, as an organizational leader, allow somebody to not adhere to the core values, I am setting a new standard. That is no longer a non-negotiable. So when I come back 2 weeks later and I'm talking to somebody else about, hey, commitment, when you lose the ball, you need to be upset. And when you are upset, you need to run. Well, it's like, well, Alba doesn't have to run. So do we really have to run? Or is it just if I scored more goals, I wouldn't have to run? Do you see the challenges
So
associated with
the
that?
message that you send when you terminate Ober's contract is you send a message to the people doubting the culture, and you send a message to the people that are all in on the culture but are unsure whether you've got the guts to implement it. So actually, the the rolling of Ober's head was always the correct decision, even if Arteta didn't get the success that he needed. He had to do that.
So, in my opinion, if a strategic leader has to protect the organization, mission, vision, core value, strategy, mission, vision, core value, and strategy. And if there is a referent leader, if there's a subordinate leader, because Abba was a leader in the organization, if there's a leader that is not going to adhere to the core values, then they have an opportunity to be able to change, or the most unkind thing I can do as a leader is to keep somebody around that does not connect to what we're doing. That is unfair to Abba. He's got to be able to go somewhere where he does connect, because that's the only way he's going to thrive. The only way. Not allow that. I can't allow somebody to stay within the organization that does not want to be there. How do we know they don't want to be there? By their actions, by their practices. Do they align with the expectations or not? And those expectations, are they clearly communicated? And they come from our core values. Yeah, so I love how you communicate about oxygen, like invigorated the organization, because it's like, okay, that is clear. There is clarity with what the expectations are. So everybody that connects to that expectation is like, yeah, we're on the right track. What I believe is what he believes. And that is going to get us to where we want to go.
So now we're well and truly out of the dark days of people not running back or not caring about what they're doing. When you're close to perfection in this sort of cultural world, is there an expectations that some of the players start to carry the burden of implementing it? Is there like a sort of self-regulation that starts to happen when you're over communicative, like you're always talking about the behaviors that reward the behaviors that we don't? Like, does it start to become self-sustaining after a while, or does Arteta still have to be on it all the time?
So it's a yes. The answer is yes, not either or. It's an and that the health of the organization can be measured, from my experience, from my perspective. The health of the organization can be measured when it is a shared responsibility, when the mission is shared responsibility, when the steward is able to communicate the non-negotiables, when the steward when the physio, when the groundskeeper, when everybody, when the organization is able to understand the mission, communicate the expectations associated with the core values, when we are all have the ability to tell that story, then it's a shared responsibility. Because it's not just Coach Arteta making sure that the expectations are met. It's not just the players making sure the expectations are met. It's when the fans, when those in the stands are making sure that the expectations are met, when the grounds crew, when the physio, well, all of those things. Like, that's how you understand that you've got a healthy organization, to the point where it feels like for Coach Arteta that he has less to do. He doesn't, but it is freeing, where he has the ability now to shift focus to, say, strategy, because he has this baseline understanding of the culture that is then protected by every member of the organization.
There are managers that have hit very high levels in the game that flame out quite early. I'm thinking of Antonio Conte, obsessive about the standards. Mourinho at peak still didn't last very long in these jobs, ended up falling out with players. Are there common threads between coaches like Arteta, Pep, Klopp, and coaches like Allegri, Conte, and Mourinho? Maybe Allegri's unfair because he was Juventus for a long time, but Conte and Mourinho are standards merchants, no doubt.
Yeah.
But something doesn't something isn't quite right in
That's
the
right.
way they operate. And I know that you're not in the dressing rooms, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. So everything that we talk about leadership, I've learned mentors, every book of here's the deal. You can hang every component, characteristic of leadership, whatever you want to talk. You take every self-help book that you can get at the top aisle, some bookstore, everything you see online. Everything about leadership can be hung on two hooks. Everything. My role as a leader comes down to two things. Is the job getting done? Is my team coming together? That's it. That's leadership. Is the job getting done? Is my team coming together? You can't have one without the other. Tell leaders all the time. I've worked for not many, I won't say that. There's been some that I've worked in the military. And you've got a leader that is hyper focused on the job getting done, so much so that he will wring out every ounce of passion, effort, and energy from every subordinate within their organization so that they can plant the flag on their objective and move on. And then looking back, you've got just strewn bodies all along the way. Absolutely no one wants to do anything else for the organization. Like they are just wrung dry. And that leader has moved on somewhere else and not even caring about the weight that's left behind. You see, okay, that's the job getting done and having no concern whatsoever about the team coming together. On the flip side of that, you can have, hey, you wake up, you can't wait to go to work. You absolutely love everybody that you're working with and nothing's getting done. That's called a party. Okay, so the deal you can't have, you got to have both, right? So when you talk about the Conte, Marie, you've got the job was done. And you say all the time, every time you're like, hey, those guys stay around what, 2 years? That's in the organization is always worse off when they leave.
They do not leave a better project.
No, because the job was done. They got the trophy, that whatever it was, they were like, hey, you can't brought me in to bring trophies, and and then it's worse when they leave. But they got that trophy. And the job was done, but the team was not coming together. Okay, the flip side, I would argue Coach Southgate did an outstanding job from my perspective, from what I'm reading. And again, I'm new to the game here, and I acknowledge that. But in terms of the organization coming together, the humans being taken into account and bonding together, like that was done. Like the reputation of the England squad now versus when he took over is better. The team has come together with England, and job is not done. There were the regardless of how many quarterfinals or finals, whatever, the job was not done because they would be favorites and did not come home with the trophy. It's got to be both. So now I'm not saying every leader's got to be everybody to everything. I do believe that Coach Arteta looks at both of those things. He is constantly, how can we bring the families in? How can we take them to Dubai? How can writing of the notes where family members or come out to the pitch or all of these things is he wants to bring the team together, where physios come out and participate in drills. And he's all of that. He's just trying to bring people together. On the flip side of that, he is looking for every tactical advantage possible. He's like, oh, people don't think that set pieces are a good way, or I don't know, whatever. I'm like, what? You can score, it's a score. He's like, any way that I can get a goal, I'm going to pour into that, because he is both about the job getting done and the team coming together.
Kind of like it's a really interesting way that you've just framed it there. It's like the problem with investing in a Mourinho or a Conte is winning is not a strategy, and it's not
Good.
From a long-term perspective, it's not a good idea.
So
and you kind of want to, you say some of the best clubs in the world, it's bigger than winning, right? It's like Liverpool, it's bigger than winning. Manchester City, I mean, I know like there's stuff going on there at the moment, but they are strategic. They have vision, like they're extremely well-oiled machine, but it's not solely about winning for them. They're trying to do more. But Conte is win at all costs. Win at all costs, even if you burn the reputation of the club. Win at all costs if you ruin the transfer budget for the next 5 years. Win at all costs if we're left with 5 35-year-olds, because that one trophy is the most important thing. Whereas Arsenal, all the best clubs in the world are building sustainable models of football built around principles that don't change. So that's why Mourinho is where he is now, because people are they're not invested in the idea of doing that. But the jobs get shorter, less and less elite by the year.
All right, so you've hit the third component. Now you're talking about vision. Now you're talking about long-term effects. Where do we want to be able to get to? So Arsenal's vision, victory through harmony. That's their vision. And what they believe is that, hey, if we continue to make our fans proud wherever they are, if we mission every day, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, we're going to make our fans proud. 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 And what they believe is that if they do that every minute, hour of the day, make our fans proud. And they do that within the core values of we're always going to have respect. We're always going to have commitment. We're always going to have passion. We're never not going to have those things when we make our fans proud. They believe that they're going to be victorious and they're going to be harmonious. And think about those two things, right? I mean, why do I connect with it so much? The job is getting done, victory. The team is coming together, harmony. Victory, harmony. Job getting done, team coming together. I am a believer. And what you're talking about is it's not good enough to have victory with disharmony, because that's what you described with the 2 years, the transfer budget is shot. He doesn't care because he's going to the next league or he's going to get his whatever. He'll sit there in the press conference and he'll bash all of the senior leaders. I mean, we saw that with Conte over and over and over. He'll just bash the senior. I'm not getting what I want. I'm not getting what victory, disharmony. Not okay with Arsenal. Not okay. If we believe what we say we believe, it is not okay. And that's why I appreciated what you always talk about. Like, don't bring him in here. Do not bring him in here, because it will be worse when he leaves. And we know he's going to leave. We've seen the pattern over and over and over. We want, hey, what's that 20? Coach Wenger, remember, I am post. I am post that. So I'm treading delicately here. Towards the end, as I understand it, the team was coming together. However, we were not making those tactical changes so that we could keep up with the rest of the league, and the job was not getting done.
Vibes FC. We were Vibes FC.
It's not an attack.
Yeah.
It's not an attack. I understand there was a tremendous amount of, like, he had to pay for the Emirates, and he had to pay for, like, I get it. I'm not trying. He had so much context, and it is possible that the team was coming together and the job was not getting done. And that's an organizational decision. That's not just his. And what we're looking for is to be able to do both and be able to do it for a very, very long time. Hopefully my lifetime.
Fingers crossed on that one. Okay. Well, listen, we've done an hour. That was absolutely fascinating, Michael. Michael, where can people find you? What's your business called? Where can people find you?
Yeah, that's right. So I'm the president of Michael Rainey and Associates, mraleadership.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Michael Rainey, profile Michael-Rainey-MRA.
Check in the bio. I'll put your link in the message so people can come and find you. That was brilliant. Just before we go, have you got some books that you would recommend for people that were interested in this chat?
Yeah, I would. So the organizational psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania by the name of Dr. Adam Grant. He's an organizational psychologist, like I said, podcast. His tagline is "How to Make Work Not Suck." And so I'm always, I like it. So he already had me. The book that I'm reading right now that I would highly recommend of his is called Think Again. And the tagline is, intelligence is usually seen as the ability to think and learn, but in a rapidly changing world, there's another set of cognitive skills that might matter more, the ability to rethink and unlearn. So how I tell leaders is you need to accept the fact that you might be wrong. There's always more you can't see than you can. You need to understand that you are not able to see everything, so that we must seek out diverse and critical thought to help me see what I cannot. And Think Again does a good job of, I think, of showing the research behind that.
Fantastic. I'm going to jump on that book. All right. That takes us to the end of our podcast. Michael, that was absolutely brilliant. I love talking about culture, and like I'm sitting here taking notes on some of the things that you said so I can implement them into my day to day. Thank you for joining. If you like that podcast, give us a little 5-star review. I'll make sure that I pass them on to Michael so that he hears your kind words. And we'll be gearing up for PSG tomorrow. There's an on the whistle. As always, or if this comes out later, I don't know. I don't know when this is going to come out. I want to make sure that it gets maximum listenership because it was absolutely fantastic. So thank you. And on that note, I'll turn off the loop and we'll say ciao for now. Ciao for now.
No.